Berkshire's performance versus the S&P 500. Note: data are for calendar years with these exceptions: 1965 and 1966, year ended 9/30, 1967, 15 months ended 12/31. R. Berkshire Hathaway Inc. To the shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway Incorporated. Berkshire earned $42.5 billion in 2020, according to generally accepted accounting principles, common called GAAP. The four components of that figure are $21.9 billion of operating earnings, $4.9 billion of reals capital gains, a $26.7 billion gain from an increase in the amount of net unrealized capital gains that exist in the stocks we hold, and finally, an $11 billion loss from a write-down in the value of a few subsidiary and affiliate businesses that we own. All items are stated on an after-tax basis. Operating earnings are what count most, even during periods when they are not the largest item in our GAAP total. Our focus at Berkshire is both to increase this segment of our income and to acquire large and favorably situated businesses. Last year, however, we met neither goal. Berkshire made no sizable acquisitions and operating earnings fell 9%. We did, though, increase Berkshire's per-share intrinsic value by both retaining earnings and repurchasing about 5% of our shares. The two GAAP components pertaining to capital gains or losses, whether realized or unrealized, fluctuated capriciously from year to year, reflecting swings in the stock market. Whatever today's figures, Charlie Munger, my longtime partner, and I firmly believe that, over time, Berkshire's capital gains from its investment holdings will be substantial. As I've emphasized many times, Charlie and I view Berkshire's holdings of marketable stocks, at year-end worth $281 billion, as a collection of businesses. We don't control the operations of those companies, but we do share proportionately in their long-term prosperity. From an accounting standpoint, however, our portion of their earnings is not included in Berkshire's income. Instead, only what these investees pay us in dividends is recorded on our books. Under GAAP, the huge sums that investees retain on our behalf become invisible. What's out of sight, however, should not be out of mind. Those unrecorded retained earnings are usually building value, lots of value, for Berkshire. Investees use the withheld funds to expand their business, make acquisitions, pay off debt, and often to repurchase their stock, an act that increases our share of their future earnings. As we pointed out in these pages last year, retained earnings have propelled American business throughout our country's history. What worked for Carnegie and Rockefeller has, over the years, worked its magic for millions of shareholders as well. Of course, some of our investees will disappoint, adding little, if anything, to the value of their company by retaining earnings. But others will over-deliver, a few spectacularly. In aggregate, we expect our share of the huge pile of earnings retained by Berkshire's non-controlled businesses, what others would label our equity portfolio, to eventually deliver us an equal or greater amount of capital gains. Over our 56-year tenure, that expectation has been met. The final component in our GAAP figure, that ugly $11 billion write-down, is almost entirely the quantification of a mistake I made in 2016. That year, Berkshire purchased Precision Castparts, PCC, and I paid too much for the company. No one misled me in any way. I was simply too optimistic about PCC's normalized profit potential. Last year, my miscalculation was laid bare by adverse developments throughout the aerospace industry, PCC's most important source of customers. In purchasing PCC, Berkshire bought a fine company, the best in its business. Mark Donegan, PCC's CEO, is a passionate manager who consistently pours the same energy into the business that he did before we purchased it. We are lucky to have him running things. I believe I was right in concluding that PCC would, over time, earn good returns on the net tangible assets deployed in its operations. I was wrong, however, in judging the average amount of future earnings, and, consequently, wrong in my calculation of the proper price to pay for the business. PCC is far from my first error of that sort, but it's a big one. Two strings to our bow. Berkshire is often labeled a conglomerate, a negative term applied to holding companies that own a hodgepodge of unrelated businesses. And, yes, that describes Berkshire, but only in part. To understand how and why we differ from the prototype conglomerate, let's review a little history. Over time, conglomerates have generally limited themselves to buying businesses in their entirety. That strategy, however, came with two major problems. One was unsolvable. Most of the truly great businesses had no interest in having anyone take them over. Consequently, deal-hungry conglomerateurs had to focus on so-so companies that lacked important and durable competitive strengths. That was not a great pond in which to fish. Beyond that, as conglomerateurs dipped into this universe of mediocre businesses, they often found themselves required to pay staggering control premiums to snare their quarry. Aspiring conglomerateurs knew the answer to this overpayment problem. They simply needed to manufacture a vastly overvalued stock of their own that could be used as a currency for pricey acquisitions. I'll pay you $10,000 for your dog by giving you 2 of my $5,000 cats. Often, the tools for fostering the overvaluation of a conglomerate's stock involved promotional techniques and imaginative accounting maneuvers that were, at best, deceptive and that sometimes crossed the line into fraud. When these tricks were successful, the conglomerate pushed its own stock to, say, 3x its business value in order to offer the target 2x its value. Investing illusions can continue for a surprisingly long time. Wall Street loves the fees that dealmaking generates, and the press loves the stories that colorful promoters provide. At a point, also, the soaring price of a promoted stock can itself become the proof that an illusion is reality. Eventually, of course, the party ends, and many business emperors are found to have no clothes. Financial history is replete with the names of famous conglomerateurs who were initially lionized as business geniuses by journalists, analysts, and investment bankers, but whose creations ended up as business junkyards. Conglomerates earned their terrible reputation. Charlie and I want our conglomerate to own all or part of a diverse group of businesses with good economic characteristics and good managers. Whether Berkshire controls these businesses, however, is unimportant to us. It took me a while to wise up. But Charlie, and also my 20-year struggle with the textile operation I inherited at Berkshire, finally convinced me that owning a non-controlling portion of a wonderful business is more profitable, more enjoyable, and far less work than struggling with 100% of a marginal enterprise. For those reasons, our conglomerate will remain a collection of controlled and non-controlled businesses. Charlie and I will simply deploy your capital into whatever we believe makes the most sense, based on a company's durable competitive strengths, the capabilities and character of its management, price. If that strategy requires little or no effort on our part, so much the better. In contrast to the scoring system utilized in diving competitions, you are awarded no points in business endeavors for degree of difficulty. Furthermore, as Ronald Reagan cautioned, it's said that hard work never killed anyone, but I say why take the chance? The family jewels, and how we increase your share of these gems on page A1. We list Berkshire's subsidiaries, a smorgasbord of businesses employing 360,000 at year-end. You can read much more about these controlled operations in the 10K that fills the back part of this report. Our major positions in companies that we partly own and don't control are listed on page 7 of this letter. That portfolio of businesses, too, is large and diverse. Most of Berkshire's value, however, resides in 4 businesses, 3 controlled, and 1 in which we have only a 5.4% interest. All 4 are jewels. The largest in value is our property, casualty insurance operation, which for 53 years has been the core of Berkshire. Our family of insurers is unique in the insurance field. So too is its manager, Ajit Jain, who joined Berkshire in 1986. Overall, the insurance fleet operates with far more capital than is deployed by any of its competitors worldwide. That financial strength, coupled with the huge flow of cash Berkshire annually receives from its non-insurance businesses, allows our insurance companies to safely follow an equity-heavy investment strategy not feasible for the overwhelming majority of insurers. Those competitors, for both regulatory and credit rating reasons, must focus on bonds. And bonds are not the place to be these days. Can you believe that the income recently available from a 10-year U.S. Treasury bond, the yield was 0.93% at year-end, had fallen 94% from the 15.8% yield available in September 1981? In certain large and important countries, such as Germany and Japan, investors earn a negative return on trillions of dollars of sovereign debt. Fixed income investors worldwide, whether pension funds, insurance companies, or retirees, face a bleak future. Some insurers, as well as other bond investors, may try to juice the pathetic returns now available by shifting their purchases to obligations backed by shaky borrowers. Risky loans, however, are not the answer to inadequate interest rates. 3 decades ago, the once mighty savings and loan industry destroyed itself, partly by ignoring that maxim. Berkshire now enjoys $138 billion of insurance float, funds that do not belong to us, but are nevertheless ours to deploy, whether in bonds, stocks, or cash equivalents such as U.S. Treasury bills. Float has some similarities to bank deposits. Cash flows in and out daily to insurers, with the total they hold changing very little. The massive sum held by Berkshire is likely to remain near its present level for many years and, on a cumulative basis, has been costless to us. That happy result, of course, could change, but, over time, I like our odds. I have repetitiously, some might say endlessly, explained our insurance operation in my annual letters to you. Therefore, I will this year ask new shareholders who wish to learn more about our insurance business and float to read the pertinent section of the 2019 report, reprinted on page A2. It's important that you understand the risks, as well as the opportunities, existing in our insurance activities. Our second and third most valuable assets, it's pretty much a toss-up at this point, are Berkshire's 100% ownership of BNSF, America's largest railroad measured by freight volume, and our 4% ownership of Apple. And in the fourth spot is our 91% ownership of Berkshire Hathaway Energy, BHE. What we have here is a very unusual utility business, whose annual earnings have grown from $122 million to $3.4 billion during our 21 years of ownership. I'll have more to say about BNSF and BHE later in this letter. For now, however, I would like to focus on a practice Berkshire will periodically use to enhance your interest in both its Big Four as well as the many other assets Berkshire owns. Last year we demonstrated our enthusiasm for Berkshire's spread of properties by repurchasing the equivalent of 80,998 A shares, spending $24.7 billion in the process. That action increased your ownership in all of Berkshire's businesses by 5.2% without requiring you to so much as touch your wallet. Following criteria Charlie and I have long recommended, we made those purchases because we believed they would both enhance the intrinsic value per share for continuing shareholders and would leave Berkshire with more than ample funds for any opportunities or problems it might encounter. In no way do we think that Berkshire shares should be repurchased at simply any price. I emphasize that point because American CEOs have an embarrassing record of devoting more company funds to repurchases when prices have risen than when they have tanked. Our approach is exactly the reverse. Berkshire's investment in Apple vividly illustrates the power of repurchases. We began buying Apple stock late in 2016, and by early July 2018, owned slightly more than 1 billion Apple shares, split adjusted. Saying that, I'm referencing the investment held in Berkshire's general account, and am excluding a very small and separately managed holding of Apple shares that was subsequently sold. When we finished our purchases in mid-2018, Berkshire's general account owned 5.2% of Apple. Our cost for that stake was $36 billion. Since then, we have both enjoyed regular dividends, averaging about $775 million annually, and have also, in 2020, pocketed an additional $11 billion by selling a small portion of our position. Despite that sale, voila! Berkshire now owns 5.4% of Apple. That increase was costless to us, coming about because Apple has continuously repurchased its shares, thereby substantially shrinking the number it now has outstanding. Leo. But that's far from all of the good news. Because we also repurchased Berkshire shares during the 212 years, you now indirectly own a full 10% more of Apple's assets and future earnings than you did in July 2018. This agreeable dynamic continues. Berkshire has repurchased more shares since year-end, and is likely to further reduce its share count in the future. Apple has publicly stated an intention to repurchase its shares as well. As these reductions occur, Berkshire shareholders will not only own a greater interest in our insurance group and in BNSF and BHE, but will also find their indirect ownership of Apple increasing as well. The math of repurchases grinds away slowly, but can be powerful over time. The process offers a simple way for investors to own an ever-expanding portion of exceptional businesses. And as a sultry Mae West assured us, too much of a good thing can be wonderful. Investments. Below we list our 15 common stock investments that at year-end were our largest in market value. We exclude our Kraft Heinz holding 325,442,152 shares because Berkshire is part of a control group and therefore must account for that investment using the equity method. On its balance sheet, Berkshire carries the Kraft Heinz holding at a GAAP figure of $13.3 billion, an amount that represents Berkshire's share of the audited net worth of Kraft Heinz on the 31st of December 2020. Please note, though, that the market value of our shares on that date was only $11.3 billion. Excludes shares held by pension funds of Berkshire subsidiaries. Buy common stock, a combination now being valued at $9 billion. A tale of two cities. Success stories abound throughout America. Since our country's birth, individuals with an idea, ambition, and often just a pittance of capital have succeeded beyond their dreams by creating something new or by improving the customer's experience with something old. Charlie and I journeyed throughout the nation to join with many of these individuals or their families. On the West Coast, we began the routine in 1972 with our purchase of See's candy. A full century ago, Mary C. set out to deliver an age-old product that she had reinvented with special recipes. Added to her business plan were quaint stores staffed by friendly salespeople. Her first small outlet in Los Angeles eventually led to several hundred shops spread throughout the West. Today, Mrs. C's creations continue to delight customers while providing lifelong employment for thousands of women and men. Berkshire's job is simply not to meddle with the company's success. When a business manufactures and distributes a non-essential consumer product, the customer is the boss. And, after 100 years, the customer's message to Berkshire remains clear. Don't mess with my candy. The website is https://www.sees.com/trythepeanutbrittle. Let's move across the continent to Washington, D.C. In 1936, Leo Goodwin, along with his wife Lillian, became convinced that auto insurance, a standardized product customarily purchased from agents, could be sold directly at a much lower price. Armed with $100,000, the pair took on giant insurers possessing 1,000 times or more their capital. Government Employees Insurance Company, later shortened to Geico, was on its way. By luck, I was exposed to the company's potential a full 70 years ago. It instantly became my first love. Fan investment sort. You know the rest of the story. Berkshire eventually became the 100% owner of Geico, which at 84 years of age is constantly fine-tuning but not changing the vision of Leo and Lillian. There has been, however, a change in the company's size. In 1937, its first full year of operation, Geico did $238,288 of business. Last year the figure was $35 billion. Today, with much of finance, media, government, and tech located in coastal areas, it's easy to overlook the many miracles occurring in Middle America. Let's focus on two communities that provide stunning illustrations of the talent and ambition existing throughout our country. You will not be surprised that I begin with Omaha. In 1940, Jack Ringwalt, a graduate of Omaha's Central High School, the alma mater as well of Charlie, my dad, my first wife, our 3 children and 2 grandchildren, decided to start a property casualty insurance company funded by $125,000 in capital. Jack's dream was preposterous, requiring his pipsqueak operation, somewhat pompously christened as National Indemnity, to compete with giant insurers, all of which operated with abundant capital. Additionally, those competitors were solidly entrenched with nationwide networks of well-funded and long-established local agents. Under Jack's plan, National Indemnity, unlike Geico, would itself use whatever agencies deigned to accept it and consequently enjoy no cost advantage in its acquisition of business. To overcome those formidable handicaps, National Indemnity focused on oddball risks which were deemed unimportant by the big boys. And, improbably, the strategy succeeded. Jack was honest, shrewd, likable, and a bit quirky. In particular, he disliked regulators. When he periodically became annoyed with their supervision, he would feel an urge to sell his company. Fortunately, I was nearby on one of those occasions. Jack liked the idea of joining Berkshire, and we made a deal in 1967, taking all of 15 minutes to reach a handshake. I never asked for an audit. Today, National Indemnity is the only company in the world prepared to insure certain giant risks. And, yes, it remains based in Omaha, a few miles from Berkshire's home office. Over the years, we have purchased 4 additional businesses from Omaha families, the best known among them being Nebraska Furniture Mart, NFM. The company's founder, Rose Blumkin, Mrs. B., arrived in Seattle in 1915 as a Russian immigrant, unable to read or speak English. She settled in Omaha several years later, and by 1936 had saved $2,500 with which to start a furniture store. Competitors and suppliers ignored her, and for a time their judgment seemed correct. World War II stalled her business, and at year-end 1946, the company's net worth had grown to only $72,264. Cash, both in the till and on deposit, totaled $50. That's not a typo. One invaluable asset, however, went unrecorded in the 1946 figures. Louis Blumpkin, Mrs. B's only son, had rejoined the store, after 4 years in the U.S. Army. Louis fought at Normandy's Omaha Beach following the D-Day invasion, earned a Purple Heart for injuries sustained in the Battle of the Bulge, and finally sailed home in November 1945. Once Mrs. B and Louis were reunited, there was no stopping NFM. Driven by their dream, mother and son worked days, nights and weekends. The result was a retailing miracle. By 1983, the pair had created a business worth $60 million. That year, on my birthday, Berkshire purchased 80% of NFM, again without an audit. I counted on Blumpkin family members to run the business. The third and fourth generation do so today. Mrs. B, it should be noted, worked daily until she was 103, a ridiculously premature retirement age as judged by Charlie and me. NFM now owns the 3 largest home furnishing stores in the U.S. Each set a sales record in 2020, a feat achieved despite the closing of NFM stores for more than 6 weeks because of COVID-19. A postscript to this story says it all. When Mrs. B's large family gathered for holiday meals, she always asked that they sing a song before eating. Her selection never varied. Irving Berlin's God Bless America. Let's move somewhat east to Knoxville, the 3rd largest city in Tennessee. There, Berkshire has ownership in 2 remarkable companies, Clayton Homes, 100% owned, and Pilot Travel Centers, 38% owned now, but headed for 80% in 2023. Each company was started by a young man who had graduated from the University of Tennessee and stayed put in Knoxville. Neither had a meaningful amount of capital, nor wealthy parents. But, so what? Today, Clayton and Pilot each have annual pre-tax earnings of more than $1 billion. Together they employ about 47,000 men and women. Jim Clayton, after several other business ventures, founded Clayton Homes on a shoestring in 1956, and Big Jim Haslam started what became Pilot Travel Centers in 1958 by purchasing a service station for $6,000. Each of Thiemann later brought into the business a son with the same passion, values, and brains as his father. Sometimes there is a magic to genes. Big Jim Haslam, now 90, has recently authored an inspirational book in which he relates how Jim Clayton's son, Kevin, encouraged the Haslams to sell a large portion of Pilot to Berkshire. Every retailer knows that satisfied customers are a store's best salespeople. That's true when businesses are changing hands as well. When you next fly over Knoxville or Omaha, tip your hat to the Claytons, Haslams, and Blumpkins, as well as to the army of successful entrepreneurs who populate every part of our country. These builders needed America's framework for prosperity, a unique experiment when it was crafted in 1789, to achieve their potential. In turn, America needed citizens like Jim C., Jim H., Mrs. B. and Louis to accomplish the miracles our founding fathers sought. Today, many people forge similar miracles throughout the world, creating a spread of prosperity that benefits all of humanity. In its brief 232 years of existence, however, there has been no incubator for unleashing human potential like America. Despite some severe interruptions, our country's economic progress has been breathtaking. Beyond that, we retain our constitutional aspiration of becoming a more perfect union. Progress on that front has been slow, uneven, and often discouraging. We have, however, moved forward and will continue to do so. Our unwavering conclusion: never bet against America. The Berkshire Partnership. Berkshire is a Delaware corporation, and our directors must follow the state's laws. Among them is a requirement that board members must act in the best interest of the corporation and its stockholders. Our directors embrace that doctrine. In addition, of course, Berkshire directors want the company to delight its customers, to develop and reward the talents of its 360,000 associates, to behave honorably with lenders, and to be regarded as a good citizen of the municities and states in which we operate. We value these 4 important constituencies. None of these groups, however, have a vote in determining such matters as dividends, strategic direction, CEO selection, or acquisitions and divestitures. Responsibilities like those fall solely on Berkshire's directors, who must faithfully represent the long-term interests of the corporation and its owners. Beyond legal requirements, Charlie and I feel a special obligation to the many individual shareholders of Berkshire. A bit of personal history may help you to understand our unusual attachment and how it shapes our behavior. Before my Berkshire years, I managed money for many individuals through a series of partnerships, the first 3 of those formed in 1956. As time passed, the use of multiple entities became unwieldy, and in 1962, we amalgamated 12 partnerships into a single unit, Buffett Partnership Limited, BPL. By that year, virtually all of my own money, and that of my wife as well, had become invested alongside the funds of my many limited partners. I received no salary or fees. Instead, as the general partner, I was compensated by my limited partners only after they secured returns above an annual threshold of 6%. If returns failed to meet that level, the shortfall was to be carried forward against my share of future profits. Fortunately, that never happened. Partnership returns always exceeded the 6% bogey. As the years went by, a large part of the resources of my parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, and in-laws became invested in the partnership. Charlie formed his partnership in 1962 and operated much as I did. Neither of us had any institutional investors, and very few of our partners were financially sophisticated. The people who joined our ventures simply trusted us to treat their money as we treated our own. These individuals, either intuitively or by relying on the advice of friends, correctly concluded that Charlie and I had an extreme aversion to permanent loss of capital and that we would not have accepted their money unless we expected to do reasonably well with it. I stumbled into business management after BPL acquired control of Berkshire in 1965. Later still, in 1969, we decided to dissolve BPL. After year-end, the partnership distributed, pro rata, all of its cash along with 3 stocks, the largest by value being BPL's 75% interest in Berkshire. Charlie, meanwhile, wound up his operation in 1977. Among the assets he distributed to partners was a major interest in Blue Chip Stamps, a company his partnership, Berkshire and I jointly controlled. Blue Chip was also among the 3 stocks my partnership had distributed upon its dissolution. In 1983, Berkshire and Blue Chip merged, thereby expanding Berkshire's base of registered shareholders from 1,900 to 2,900. Charlie and I wanted everyone, old, new, and prospective shareholders, to be on the same page. Therefore, the 1983 annual report up front laid out Berkshire's major business principles. The first principle began, "Although our form is corporate, our attitude is partnership." That defined our relationship in 1983. It defines it today. Charlie and I, and our directors as well, believe this dictum will serve Berkshire well for many decades to come. Ownership of Berkshire now resides in 5 large buckets, one occupied by me as a founder of sorts. That bucket is certain to empty as the shares I own are annually distributed to various philanthropies. 2 of the remaining 4 buckets are filled by institutional investors, each handling other people's money. That, however, is where the similarity between those buckets ends. Their investing procedures could not be more different. In one institutional bucket are index funds, a large and mushrooming segment of the investment world. These funds simply mimic the index that they track. The favorite of index investors is the S&P 500, of which Berkshire is a component. Index funds, it should be emphasized, own Berkshire shares simply because they are required to do so. They are on automatic pilot, buying and selling only for weighting purposes. In the other institutional bucket are professionals who manage their clients' money, whether those funds belong to wealthy individuals, universities, pensioners, or whomever. These professional managers have a mandate to move funds from one investment to another based on their judgment as to valuation and prospects. That is an honorable, though difficult, occupation. We are happy to work for this active group, while they meanwhile search for a better place to deploy the funds of their clientele. Some managers, to be sure, have a long-term focus and trade very infrequently. Others use computers employing algorithms that may direct the purchase or sale of shares in a nanosecond. Some professional investors will come and go, based upon their macroeconomic judgments. Our 4th bucket consists of individual shareholders who operate in a manner similar to the active institutional managers I've just described. These owners, understandably, think of their Berkshire shares as a possible source of funds when they see another investment that excites them. We have no quarrel with that attitude, which is similar to the way we look at some of the equities we own at Berkshire. All of that said, Charlie and I would be less than human if we did not feel a special kinship with our fifth bucket. The million-plus individual investors who simply trust us to represent their interests, whatever the future may bring. They have joined us with no intent to leave, adopting a mindset similar to that held by our original partners. Indeed, many investors from our partnership years, or their descendants, remain substantial owners of Berkshire. A prototype of those veterans is Stan Trulson, a cheerful and generous Omaha ophthalmologist as well as personal friend, who turned 100 on the 13th of November 2020. In 1959, Stan, along with 10 other young Omaha doctors, formed a partnership with me. The docs creatively labeled their venture, MD Limited. Annually, they joined my wife and me for a celebratory dinner at our home. When our partnership distributed its Berkshire shares in 1969, all of the doctors kept the stock they received. They may not have known the ins and outs of investing or accounting, but they did know that at Berkshire they would be treated as partners. 2 of Stan's comrades from MD are now in their high 92s and continue to hold Berkshire shares. This group's startling durability, along with the fact that Charlie and I are 97 and 90 respectively, serves up an interesting question. Could it be that Berkshire ownership fosters longevity? Berkshire's unusual and valued family of individual shareholders may add to your understanding of our reluctance to court Wall Street analysts and institutional investors. We already have the investors we want and don't think that they, on balance, would be upgraded by replacements. There are only so many seats, that is, shares outstanding, available for Berkshire ownership. And we very much like the people already occupying them. Of course, some turnover in partners will occur. Charlie and I hope, however, that it will be minimal. Who, after all, seeks rapid turnover in friends, neighbors, or marriage? In 1958, Phil Fisher wrote a superb book on investing. In it, he analogized running a public company to managing a restaurant. If you are seeking diners, he said, you can attract a clientele and prosper featuring either hamburgers served with a Coke or a French cuisine accompanied by exotic wines. But you must not, Fisher warned, capriciously switch from one to the other. Your message to potential customers must be consistent with what they will find upon entering your premises. At Berkshire, we have been serving hamburgers and Coke for 56 years. We cherish the clientele this fare has attracted. The tens of millions of other investors and speculators in the United States and elsewhere have a wide variety of equity choices to fit their tastes. They will find CEOs and market gurus with enticing ideas. If they want price targets, managed earnings and stories, they will not lack suitors. Technicians will confidently instruct them as to what some wiggles on a chart portend for a stock's next move. The calls for action will never stop. Many of those investors, I should add, will do quite well. After all, ownership of stocks is very much a positive-sum game. Indeed, a patient and level-headed monkey, who constructs a portfolio by throwing 50 darts at a board listing all of the S&P 500, will, over time, enjoy dividends and capital gains, just as long as it never gets tempted to make changes in its original selections. Productive assets such as farms, real estate, and, yes, business ownership produce wealth. Lots of it. Most owners of such properties will be rewarded. All that's required is the passage of time, an inner calm, ample diversification, and a minimization of transactions and fees. Still, investors must never forget that their expenses are Wall Street's income. And, unlike my monkey, Wall Streeters do not work for peanuts. When seats open up at Berkshire, and we hope they are few, we want them to be occupied by newcomers who understand and desire what we offer. After decades of management, Charlie and I remain unable to promise results. We can and do, however, pledge to treat you as partners. And so too will our successors. A Berkshire number that may surprise you. Recently, I learned a fact about our company that I had never suspected. Berkshire owns American-based property, plant and equipment, the sort of assets that make up the business infrastructure of our country, with a GAAP valuation exceeding the amount owned by any other U.S. company. Berkshire's depreciated cost of these domestic fixed assets is $154 billion. Next in line on this list is AT&T, with property, plant, and equipment of $127 billion. Our leadership in fixed asset ownership, I should add, does not, in itself, signal an investment triumph. The best results occur at companies that require minimal assets to conduct high-margin businesses and offer goods or services that will expand their sales volume with only minor needs for additional capital. We, in fact, own a few of these exceptional businesses, but they are relatively small and, at best, grow slowly. Asset-heavy companies, however, can be good investments. Indeed, we are delighted with our two giants, BNSF and BHE. In 2011, Berkshire's first full year of BNSF ownership, the two companies had combined earnings of $4.2 billion. In 2020, a tough year for many businesses, the pair earned $8.3 billion. BNSF and BHE will require major capital expenditures for decades to come. The good news is that both are likely to deliver appropriate returns on the incremental investment. Let's look first at BNSF. Your railroad carries about 15% of all non-local ton miles, a ton of freight moved 1 mile, of goods that move in the United States, whether by rail, truck, pipeline, barge, or aircraft. By a significant margin, BNSF's loads top those of any other carrier. The history of American railroads is fascinating. After 150 years or so of frenzied construction, skullduggery, overbuilding, bankruptcies, reorganizations and mergers, the railroad industry finally emerged a few decades ago as mature and rationalized. BNSF began operations in 1850 with a 12-mile line in northeastern Illinois. Today, it has 390 antecedents whose a railroad have been purchased or merged. The company's extensive lineage is slayed. Taft, www.bnsf-resources/pdf/about-bnsf/history_and_legacy.pdf. Berkshire acquired BNSF early in 2010. Since our purchase, the railroad has invested $41 billion in fixed assets and outlaid $20 billion in excess of its depreciation charges. Railroading is an outdoor sport, featuring mile-long trains obliged to reliably operate in both extreme cold and heat, as they all the while encounter every form of terrain from deserts to mountains. Massive flooding periodically occurs. BNSF owns 23,000 miles of track, spread throughout 28 states, and must spend whatever it takes to maximize safety and service throughout its vast system. Nevertheless, BNSF has paid substantial dividends to Berkshire. $41.8 billion in total. The railroad pays us, however, only what remains after it both fulfills the needs of its business and maintains a cash balance of about $2 billion. This conservative policy allows BNSF to borrow at low rates, independent of any guarantee of its debt by Berkshire. One further word about BNSF. Last year, Carl Ice, its CEO, and his number 2, Katie Farmer, did an extraordinary job in controlling expenses while navigating a significant downturn in business. Despite a 7% decline in the volume of goods carried, the two actually increased BNSF's profit margin by 2.9 percentage points. Carl, as long planned, retired at year-end, and Katie took over as CEO. Your railroad is in good hands. BHE, unlike BNSF, pays no dividends on its common stock, a highly unusual practice in the electric utility industry. That Spartan policy has been the case throughout our 21 years of ownership. Unlike railroads, our country's electric utilities need a massive makeover in which the ultimate costs will be staggering. The effort will absorb all of BHE's earnings for decades to come. We welcome the challenge and believe the added investment will be appropriately rewarded. Let me tell you about one of BHE's endeavors. Its $18 billion commitment to rework and expand a substantial portion of the outdated grid that now transmits electricity throughout the West. BHE began this project in 2006 and expects it to be completed by 2030. Yes, 2030. The advent of renewable energy made our project a societal necessity. Historically, the coal-based generation of electricity that long prevailed was located close to huge centers of population. The best sites for the New World off-wind and solar generation, however, are often in remote areas. When BHE assessed the situation in 2006, it was no secret that a huge investment in Western transmission lines had to be made. Very few companies or governmental entities, however, were in a financial position to raise their hand after they tallied the project's cost. BHE's decision to proceed, it should be noted, was based upon its trust in America's political, economic, and judicial systems. Billions of dollars needed to be invested before meaningful revenue would flow. Transmission lines had to cross the borders of states and other jurisdictions, each with its own rules and constituencies. BHE would also need to deal with hundreds of landowners and execute complicated contracts with both the suppliers that generated renewable power and the faraway utilities that would distribute the electricity to their customers. Competing interests and defenders of the old order, along with unrealistic visionaries desiring an instantly new world, had to be brought on board. Both surprises and delays were certain. Equally certain, however, was the fact that BHE had the managerial talent, the institutional commitment, and the financial wherewithal to fulfill its promises. Though it will be many years before our Western Transmission project is completed, we are today searching for other projects of similar size to take on. Whatever the obstacles, BHE will be a leader in delivering ever cleaner energy. The annual meeting. Last year, on February 22nd, I wrote you about our plans for a gala annual meeting. Within a month, the schedule was junked. Our home office group, led by Melissa Shapiro and Mark Hamburg, Berkshire's CFO, quickly regrouped. Miraculously, their improvisations worked. Greg Abel, one of Berkshire's vice chairmen, joined me on stage Fasinga Dark Arena, 18,000 empty seats and a camera. There was no rehearsal. Greg and I arrived about 45 minutes before showtime. Debbie Bosanek, my incredible assistant who joined Berkshire 47 years ago at age 17, had put together about 25 slides displaying various facts and figures that I had assembled at home. An anonymous but highly capable team of computer and camera operators projected the slides onto the screen in proper order. Yahoo streamed the proceedings to a record-sized international audience. Becky Quick of CNBC, operating from her home in New Jersey, selected questions from thousands that shareholders had earlier submitted or that viewers had emailed to her during the 4 hours Greg and I were on stage. C's peanut brittle and fudge, along with Coca-Cola, provided us with nourishment. This year, on May 1st, we are planning to go one better. Again, we will rely on Yahoo and CNBC to perform flawlessly. Yahoo will live at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, EDT. Simplynavigato.cef, finance.yahoo.com/brclivestream. Our formal meeting will commence at 5 p.m. EDT and should finish by 5:30 p.m. Earlier, between 1:30 to 5, we will answer your questions as relayed by Becky. As always, we will have no foreknowledge as to what questions will be asked. Send your zingers to berkshirequestions@cnbc.com. Yahoo will wrap things up after 5:30. And now, drum roll, please, a surprise. This year our meeting will be held in Los Angeles, and Charlie will be on stage with me offering answers and observations throughout the 2-hour question period. I missed him last year, and, more important, you clearly missed him. Our other invaluable vice chairmen, Ajit Jain and Greg Abel, will be with us to answer questions relating to their domains. Join us via Yahoo. Direct your really tough questions to Charlie. We will have fun, and we hope you will as well. Better yet, of course, will be the day when we see you face to face. I hope and expect that will be in 2022. The citizens of Omaha, our exhibiting subsidiaries, and all of us at the home office can't wait to get you back for an honest-to-God annual meeting, Berkshire style. February 27, 2021, Chairman of the Board. Berkshire's performance versus the S&P 500 note. Data are for calendar years with these exceptions: 1,965 and 1966, year ended 9/30, 1,967, 15 months ended 12/31. R. Berkshire Hathaway Inc. To the shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway Incorporated. Charlie Munger, my longtime partner, and I have the job of managing a portion of your savings. We are honored by your trust. Our position carries with it the responsibility to report to you what we would like to know if we were the absentee owner, and you were the manager. We enjoy communicating directly with you through this annual letter, and through the annual meeting as well. Our policy is to treat all shareholders equally. Therefore, we do not hold discussions with analysts, nor large institutions. Whenever possible, also, we release important communications on Saturday mornings in order to maximize the time for shareholders and the media to absorb the news before markets open on Monday. A wealth of Berkshire facts and figures are set forth in the annual 10-K that the company regularly files with the SEC and that we reproduce on pages K1, K119. Some shareholders will find this detail engrossing. Others will simply prefer to learn what Charlie and I believe is new or interesting at Berkshire. Alas, there was little action of that sort in 2021. We did, though, make reasonable progress in increasing the intrinsic value of your shares. That task has been my primary duty for 57 years. And it will continue to be. What you own. Berkshire owns a wide variety of businesses, some in their entirety, some only in part. The second group largely consists of marketable common stocks of major American companies. Additionally, we own a few non-US equities and participate in several joint ventures or other collaborative activities. Whatever our form of ownership, our goal is to have meaningful investments in businesses with both durable economic advantages and a first-class CEO. Please note particularly that we own stocks based upon our expectations about their long-term business performance, and not because we view them as vehicles for timely market moves. That point is crucial. Charlie and I are not stock pickers, we are business pickers. I make many mistakes. Consequently, our extensive collection of businesses includes some enterprises that have truly extraordinary economics, many others that enjoy good economic characteristics, and a few that are marginal. One advantage of our common stock segment is that, on occasion, it becomes easy to buy pieces of wonderful businesses at wonderful prices. That shooting fish in a barrel experience is very rare in negotiated transactions and never occurs en masse. It is also far easier to exit from a mistake when it has been made in the marketable arena. Surprise, surprise. Here are a few items about your company that often surprise even seasoned investors. Many people perceive Berkshire as a large and somewhat strange collection of financial assets. In truth, Berkshire owns and operates more US-based infrastructure assets, classified on our balance sheet as property, plant and equipment, than are owned and operated by any other American corporation. That supremacy has never been our goal. It has, however, become a fact. At year-end, those domestic infrastructure assets were carried on Berkshire's balance sheet at $158 billion. That number increased last year and will continue to increase. Berkshire always will be building. Every year, your company makes substantial federal income tax payments. In 2021, for example, we paid $3.3 billion while the U.S. Treasury reported total corporate income tax receipts of $402 billion. Additionally, Berkshire pays substantial state and foreign taxes. "I gave it the office" is an unassailable assertion when made by Berkshire shareholders. Berkshire's history vividly illustrates the invisible and often unrecognized financial partnership between government and American businesses. Our tale begins early in 1955, when Berkshire Fine Spinning and Hathaway Manufacturing agreed to merge their businesses. In their requests for shareholder approval, the venerable New England textile companies expressed high hopes for the combination. The Hathaway solicitation, for example, assured its shareholders that the combination of the resources and managements will result in one of the strongest and most efficient organizations in the textile industry. That upbeat view was endorsed by the company's advisor, Lehman Brothers. Yes, that Lehman Brothers. I'm sure it was a joyous day in both Fall River, Berkshire, and New Bedford, Hathaway, when the union was consummated. After the band stopped playing and the bankers went home, however, the shareholders reaped a disaster. In the 9 years following the merger, Berkshire's owners watched the company's net worth crater from $51.4 million to $22.1 million. In part, this decline was caused by stock repurchases, ill-advised dividends, and plant shutdowns. But 9 years of effort by many thousands of employees delivered an operating loss as well. Berkshire's struggles were not unusual. The New England textile industry had silently entered an extended and non-reversible death march. During the 9 post-merger years, the U.S. Treasury suffered as well from Berkshire's troubles. All told, the company paid the government only $337,359 in income tax during that period, a pathetic $100 per day. Early in 1965, things changed. Berkshire installed new management that redeployed available cash and steered essentially all earnings into a variety of good businesses, most of which remained good through theirs. Coupling reinvestment of earnings with the power of compounding worked its magic, and shareholders prospered. Berkshire's owners, it should be noted, were not the only beneficiary of that course correction. Their silent partner, the U.S. Treasury, proceeded to collect many tens of billions of dollars from the company in income tax payments. Remember the $100 daily? Now, Berkshire pays roughly $9 million daily to the Treasury. In fairness to our governmental partner, our shareholders should acknowledge, indeed trumpet, the fact that Berkshire's prosperity has been fostered mightily because the company has operated in America. Our country would have done splendidly in the years since 1965 without Berkshire. Absent our American home, however, Berkshire would never have come close to becoming what it is today. When you see the flag, say thanks. From an $8.6 million purchase of National Indemnity in 1967, Berkshire has become the world leader in insurance float, money we hold and can invest, but that does not belong to us. Including a relatively small sum derived from life insurance, Berkshire's total float has grown from $19 million when we entered the insurance business to $147 billion. So far, this float has cost us less than nothing. Though we have experienced a number of years when insurance losses combined with operating expenses exceeded premiums, overall we have earned a modest 55-year profit from the underwriting activities that generated our float. Of equal importance, float is very sticky. Funds attributable to our insurance operations come and go daily, but their aggregate total is immune from precipitous decline. When it comes to investing float, we can therefore think long-term. If you are not already familiar with the concept of float, I refer you to a long explanation on page A5. To my surprise, our float increased $9 billion last year. A buildup of value that is important to Berkshire owners, though, is not reflected in our GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, presentation of earnings and net worth. Much of our huge value creation in insurance is attributable to Berkshire's good luck in my 1986 hiring of Ajit Jain. We first met on a Saturday morning, and I quickly asked Ajit what his insurance experience had been. He replied, "None." I said, "Nobody's perfect," and hired him. That was my lucky day. Ajit actually was as perfect a choice as could have been made. Better yet, he continues to be, 35 years later. One final thought about insurance. I believe that it is likely, but far from assured, that Berkshire's float can be maintained without our incurring a long-term underwriting loss. I am certain, however, that there will be some years when we experience such losses, perhaps involving very large sums. Berkshire is constructed to handle catastrophic events as no other insurer, and that priority will remain long after Charlie and I are gone. Our four giants. Through Berkshire, our shareholders own many dozens of businesses. Some of these in turn have a collection of subsidiaries of their own. For example, Marmon has more than 100 individual business operations, ranging from the leasing of railroad cars to the manufacture of medical devices. Nevertheless, operations of our big four companies account for a very large chunk of Berkshire's value. Leading this list is our cluster of insurers. Berkshire effectively owns 100% of this group, whose massive float value we earlier described. The invested assets of these insurers are further enlarged by the extraordinary amount of capital we invest to back up their promises. The insurance business is made to order for Berkshire. The product will never be obsolete, and sales volume will generally increase along with both economic growth and inflation. Also, integrity and capital will forever be important. Our company can and will behave well. There are, of course, other insurers with excellent business models and prospects. Replication of Berkshire's operation, however, would be almost impossible. Apple, our runner-up giant as measured by its year-end market value, is a different sort of holding. Here, our ownership is a mere 5.55%, up from 5.39% a year earlier. That increase sounds like small potatoes. But consider that each 0.1% of Apple's 2021 earnings amounted to $100 million. We spent no Berkshire funds to gain our accretion. Apple's repurchases did the job. It's important to understand that only dividends from Apple are counted in the GAAP earnings Berkshire reports, and last year, Apple paid us $785 million of those. Yet our share of Apple's earnings amounted to a staggering $5.6 billion. Much of what the company retained was used to repurchase Apple shares, an act we applaud. Tim Cook, Apple's brilliant CEO, quite properly regards users of Apple products as his first love, but all of his other constituencies benefit from Tim's managerial touch as well. BNSF, our third giant, continues to be the #1 artery of American commerce, which makes it an indispensable asset for America as well as for Berkshire. If the many essential products BNSF carries were instead hauled by truck, America's carbon emissions would soar. Your railroad had record earnings of $6 billion in 2021. Here, it should be noted, we are talking about the old-fashioned sort of earnings that we favor, a figure calculated after interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, and all forms of compensation. Our definition suggests a warning. Deceptive adjustments to earnings, to use a polite description, have become both more frequent and more fanciful as stocks have arisen. Speaking less politely, I would say that bull markets breed bloviated bull. BNSF trains traveled 143 million miles last year and carried 535 million tons of cargo. Both accomplishments far exceed those of any other American carrier. You can be proud of your railroad. BHE, our final giant, earned a record $4 billion in 2021. That's up more than 30-fold from the $122 million earned in 2000, the year that Berkshire first purchased a BHE stake. Now, Berkshire owns 91.1% of the company. BHE's record of societal accomplishment is as remarkable as its financial performance. The company had no wind or solar generation in 2000. It was then regarded simply as a relatively new and minor participant in the huge electric utility industry. Subsequently, under David Sokol's and Greg Abel's leadership, BHE has become a utility powerhouse, no groaning please, and a leading force in wind, solar, and transmission throughout much of the United States. Greg's report on these accomplishments appears on pages A3 and A4. The profile you will find there is not in any way one of those currently fashionable greenwashing stories. BHE has been faithfully detailing its plans and performance in renewables and transmissions every year since 2007. To further review this information, visit BHE's website at brkenergy.com. There, you will see that the company has long been making climate-conscious moves that soak up all of its earnings. More opportunities lie ahead. BHE has the management, the experience, the capital, and the appetite for the huge power projects that our country needs. Leo. Investments. Now let's talk about companies we don't control. A list that again references Apple. Below we list our 15 largest equity holdings, several of which are selections of Berkshire's two longtime investment managers, Todd Combs and Ted Weschler. At year-end, this valued pair had total authority in respect to $34 billion of investments, many of which do not meet the threshold value we use in the table. Also, a significant portion of the dollars that Todd and Ted manage are lodged in various pension plans of Berkshire-owned businesses, with the assets of these plans not included in this table. Asterisk. This is our actual purchase price, and also our tax basis. Asterisk asterisk, held by BHE. Consequently, Berkshire shareholders have only a 91.1% interest in this position. Includes a $10 billion investment in Occidental Petroleum, consisting of preferred stock and warrants to buy common stock, a combination now being valued at $10.7 billion. In addition to the footnoted Occidental holding and our various common stock positions, Berkshire also owns a 26.6% interest in Kraft Heinz, accounted for on the equity method, not market value, and carried at $13.1 billion, and 38.6% of Pilot Corp, a leader in travel centers that had revenues last year of $45 billion. Since we purchased our Pilot stake in 2017, this holding has warranted equity accounting treatment. Early in 2023, Berkshire will purchase an additional interest in Pilot that will raise our ownership to 80% and lead to our fully consolidating Pilot's earnings, assets, and liabilities in our financial statements. U.S. Treasury bills. Berkshire's balance sheet includes $144 billion of cash and cash equivalents, excluding the holdings of BNSF and BHE. Of this sum, $120 billion is held in U.S. Treasury bills, all maturing in less than a year. That stake leaves Berkshire financing about 1% of the publicly held national debt. Charlie and I have pledged that Berkshire, along with our subsidiaries other than BNSF and BHE, will always hold more than $30 billion of cash and equivalents. We want your company to be financially impregnable and never dependent on the kindness of strangers, or even that of friends. Both of us like to sleep soundly, and we want our creditors, insurance claimants, and you to do so as well. But $144 billion? That imposing sum, I assure you, is not some deranged expression of patriotism. Nor have Charlie and I lost our overwhelming preference for business ownership. Indeed, I first manifested my enthusiasm for that 80 years ago, on the 11th of March 1942, when I purchased 3 shares of City Services preferred stock. Their cost was $114.75 and required all of my savings. The Dow Jones Industrial Average that day closed at 99, a fact that should scream to you. Never bet against America. After my initial plunge, I always kept at least 80% of my net worth in equities. My favored status throughout that period was 100%, and still is. Berkshire's current 80% or so position in businesses is a consequence of my failure to find entire companies or small portions thereof, that is, marketable stocks, which meet our criteria for long-term holding. Charlie and I have endured similar cash-heavy positions from time to time in the past. These periods are never pleasant, they are also never permanent. And, fortunately, we have had a mildly attractive alternative during 2020 and 2021 for deploying capital. Read on. Share repurchases. There are 3 ways that we can increase the value of your investment. The first is always front and center in our minds. Increase the long-term earning power of Berkshire's controlled businesses through internal growth or be making acquisitions. Today, internal opportunities deliver far better returns than acquisitions. The size of those opportunities, however, is small compared to Berkshire's resources. Our second choice is to buy non-controlling part interests in the many good or great businesses that are publicly traded. From time to time, such possibilities are both numerous and blatantly attractive. Today, though, we find little that excites us. That's largely because of a truism. Long-term interest rates that are low push the prices of all productive investments upward, whether these are stocks, apartments, farms, oil wells, whatever. Other factors influence valuations as well, but interest rates will always be important. Our final path to value creation is to repurchase Berkshire shares. Through that simple act, we increase your share of the many controlled and non-controlled businesses Berkshire owns. When the price-value equation is right, this path is the easiest and most certain way for us to increase your wealth. Alongside the accretion of value to continuing shareholders, a couple of other parties gain. Repurchases are modestly beneficial to the seller of their purchased shares and to society as well. Periodically, as alternative paths become unattractive, repurchases make good sense for Berkshire's owners. During the past 2 years, we therefore repurchased 9% of the shares that were outstanding at year-end 2019 for a total cost of $51.7 billion. That expenditure left our continuing shareholders owning about 10% more of all Berkshire businesses, whether these are wholly owned, such as BNSF and Geico, or partly owned, such as Coca-Cola and Moody's. I want to underscore that for Berkshire repurchases to make sense, our shares must offer appropriate value. We don't want to overpay for the shares of other companies, and it would be value-destroying if we were to overpay when we are buying Berkshire. As of the 23rd of February 2022, since year-end we repurchased additional shares at a cost of $1.2 billion. Our appetite remains large but will always remain price-dependent. It should be noted that Berkshire's buyback opportunities are limited because of its high-class investor base. If our shares were heavily held by short-term speculators, both price volatility and transaction volumes would materially increase. That kind of reshaping would offer us far greater opportunities for creating value by making repurchases. Nevertheless, Charlie and I far prefer the owners we have, even though their admirable buy-and-keep attitudes limit the extent to which long-term shareholders can profit from opportunistic repurchases. Finally, one easily overlooked value calculation specific to Berkshire. As we've discussed, insurance float of the right sort is of great value to us. As it happens, repurchases automatically increase the amount of float per share. That figure has increased during the past 2 years by 25%, going from $79,387 per A share to $99,497, a meaningful gain that, as noted, owes some thanks to repurchases. A wonderful man and a wonderful business. Last year, Paul Andrews died. Paul was the founder and CEO of TTI, a Fort Worth-based subsidiary of Berkshire. Throughout his life, in both his business and his personal pursuits, Paul quietly displayed all the qualities that Charlie and I admire. His story should be told. In 1971, Paul was working as a purchasing agent for General Dynamics when the roof fell in. After losing a huge defense contract, the company fired thousands of employees, including Paul. With his first child due soon, Paul decided to bet on himself, using $500 of his savings to found Textronics, later renamed TTI. The company set itself up to distribute small electronic components, and first-year sales totaled $112,000. Today, TTI markets more than 1 million different items with annual volume of $7.7 billion. But back to 2006, Paul, at 63, then found himself happy with his family, his job, and his associates. But he had one nagging worry, heightened because he had recently witnessed a friend's early death and the disastrous results that followed for that man's family and business. What, Paul asked himself in 2006, would happen to the many people depending on him if he should unexpectedly die? For a year, Paul wrestled with his options. Sell to a competitor? From a strictly economic viewpoint, that course made the most sense. After all, competitors could envision lucrative synergies, savings that would be achieved as the acquirer/duplicated functions at TTI. But such a purchaser would most certainly also retain its CFO, its legal counsel, its HR unit. Their TTI counterparts would therefore be sent packing. And if a new distribution center were to be needed, the acquirer's home city would certainly be favored over Fort Worth. Whatever the financial benefits, Paul quickly concluded that selling to a competitor was not for him. He next considered seeking a financial buyer, a species once labeled, aptly so, a leveraged buyout firm. Paul knew, however, that such a purchaser would be focused on an exit strategy. And who could know what that would be? Brooding over it all, Paul found himself having no interest in handing his 5-year-old creation over to a reseller. When Paul met me, he explained why he had eliminated these two alternatives as buyers. He then summed up his dilemma by saying, in far more tactful phrasing than this, "After a year of pondering the alternatives, I want to sell to Berkshire because you are the only guy left." So, I made an offer, and Paul said yes. One meeting, one lunch, one deal. To say we both lived happily ever after is an understatement. When Berkshire purchased TTI, the company employed 2,387. Now the number is 8,043. A large percentage of that growth took place in Fort Worth and environs. Earnings have increased 673%. Annually, I would call Paul and tell him his salary should be substantially increased. Annually, he would tell me, "We can talk about that next year, Warren. I'm too busy now." When Greg Abel and I attended Paul's memorial service, we met children, grandchildren, longtime associates, including TTI's first employee, and John Roach, the former CEO of a Fort Worth company Berkshire had purchased in 2000. John had steered his friend Paul to Omaha, instinctively knowing we would be a match. At the service, Greg and I heard about the multitudes of people and organizations that Paul had silently supported. The breadth of his generosity was extraordinary, geared always to improving the lives of others, particularly those in Fort Worth. In all ways, Paul was a class act. Good luck, occasionally extraordinary luck, has played its part at Berkshire. If Paul and I had not enjoyed a mutual friend, John Roach, TTI would not have found its home with us. But that ample serving of luck was only the beginning. TTI was soon to lead Berkshire to its most important acquisition. Every fall, Berkshire directors gather for a presentation by a few of our executives. We sometimes choose the site based upon the location of a recent acquisition, by that means allowing directors to meet the new subsidiary's CEO and learn more about the acquiree's activities. In the fall of 2009, we consequently selected Fort Worth so that we could visit TTI. At that time, BNSF, which also had Fort Worth as its hometown, was the third largest holding among our marketable equities. Despite that large stake, I had never visited the railroad's headquarters. Deb Bosanek, my assistant, scheduled our board's opening dinner for October 22. Meanwhile, I arranged to arrive earlier that day to meet with Matt Rose, CEO of BNSF, whose accomplishments I had long admired. When I made the date, I had no idea that our get-together would coincide with BNSF's third-quarter earnings report, which was released late on the 22nd. The market reacted badly to the railroad's results. The Great Recession was in full force in the third quarter, and BNSF's earnings reflected that slump. The economic outlook was also bleak, and Wall Street wasn't feeling friendly to railroads, or much else. On the following day, I again got together with Matt and suggested that Berkshire would offer the railroad a better long-term home than it could expect as a public company. I also told him the maximum price that Berkshire would pay. Matt relayed the offer to his directors and advisors. 11 busy days later, Berkshire and BNSF announced a firm deal. And here I'll venture a rare prediction. BNSF will be a key asset for Berkshire and our country a century from now. The BNSF acquisition would never have happened if Paul Andrews hadn't sized up Berkshire as the right home for TTI. Thanks. I taught my first investing class 70 years ago. Since then, I have enjoyed working almost every year with students of all ages, finally retiring from that pursuit in 2018. Along the way, my toughest audience was my grandson's 5th grade class. The one-year-olds were squirming in their seats and giving me blank stares until I mentioned Coca-Cola and its famous secret formula. Instantly, every hand went up, and I learned that secrets are catnip to kids. Teaching, like writing, has helped me develop and clarify my own thoughts. Charlie calls this phenomenon the orangutan effect. If you sit down with an orangutan and carefully explain to it one of your cherished ideas, you may leave behind a puzzled primate, but will yourself exit thinking more clearly. Talking to university students is far superior. I have urged that they seek employment in 1, the field, and 2, with the kind of people they would select if they had no need for money. Economic realities, I acknowledge, may interfere with that kind of search. Even so, I urge the students never to give up the quest, for when they find that sort-of job, they will no longer be working. Charlie and I ourselves followed that liberating course after a few early stumbles. We both started as part-timers at my grandfather's grocery store, Charlie in 1940 and I in 1942. We were each assigned boring tasks and paid little, definitely not what we had in mind. Charlie later took up law, and I tried selling securities. Job satisfaction continued to elude us. Finally, at Berkshire, we found what we loved to do. With very few exceptions, we have now worked for many decades with people whom we like and trust. It's a joy in life to join with managers such as Paul Andrews or the Berkshire families I told you about last year. In our home office, we employ decent and talented people, no jerks. Turnover averages, perhaps, 1 person per year. I would like, however, to emphasize a further item that turns our jobs into fun and satisfaction, and working for you. There is nothing more rewarding to Charlie and me than enjoying the trust of individual long-term shareholders, who for many decades have joined us with the expectation that we would be a reliable custodian of their funds. Obviously, we can't select our owners, as we could do if our form of operation were a partnership. Anyone can buy shares of Berkshire today, with the intention of soon reselling them. For sure, we get a few of that type of shareholder, just as we get index funds that own huge amounts of Berkshire simply because they are required to do so. To a truly unusual degree, however, Berkshire has as owners a very large core of individuals and families that have elected to join us with an intent approaching till death do us part. Often, they have trusted us with a large, some might say excessive portion of their savings. Berkshire, these shareholders would sometimes acknowledge, might be far from the best selection they could have made, but they would add that Berkshire would rank high among those with which they would be most comfortable. And people who are comfortable with their investments will, on average, achieve better results than those who are motivated by ever-changing headlines, chatter, and promises. Long-term individual owners are both the partners Charlie and I have always sought, and the ones we constantly have in mind as we make decisions at Berkshire. To them we say, "It feels good to work for you, and you have our thanks for your trust." The annual meeting. Clear your calendar. Berkshire will have its annual gathering of capitalists in Omaha on Friday, April 29 through Sunday, May 1. The details regarding the weekend are laid out on pages A1 and A2. Omaha eagerly awaits you, as do I. I will end this letter with a sales pitch. Cousin, Jimmy Buffett has designed a pontoon party boat that is now being manufactured by Forest River, a Berkshire subsidiary. The boat will be introduced on April 29 at our Berkshire Bazaar of Bargains. And, for 2 days only, shareholders will be able to purchase Jimmy's masterpiece at a 10% discount. Your bargain hunting chairman will be buying a boat for his family's use. Join me, Warren E. Buffett, chairman of the board. Berkshire's performance versus the S&P 500. Annual percentage change in per share note. Data are for calendar years with these exceptions. 1,965 and 1966. Year ended 9/30. 1,967. 15 months ended 12/31. Berkshire Hathaway Inc. To the shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway Incorporated. Charlie Munger, my longtime partner, and I have the job of managing the savings of a great number of individuals. We are grateful for their enduring trust, a relationship that often spans much of their adult lifetime. It is those dedicated savers that are forefront in my mind as I write this letter. A common belief is that people choose to save when young, expecting thereby to maintain their living standards after retirement. Any assets that remain at death, this theory says, will usually be left to their families or, possibly, to friends and philanthropy. Our experience has differed. We believe Berkshire's individual holders largely to be of the once a saver, always a saver variety. Though these people live well, they eventually dispense most of their funds to philanthropic organizations. These, in turn, redistribute the funds by expenditures intended to improve the lives of a great many people who are unrelated to the original factor. Sometimes, the results have been spectacular. The disposition of money unmasks humans. Charlie and I watch with pleasure the vast flow of Berkshire-generated funds to public needs, and, alongside, the infrequency with which our shareholders opt for look-at-me assets and dynasty building. Who wouldn't enjoy working for shareholders like ours? What we do. Charlie and I allocate your savings at Berkshire between two related forms of ownership. First, we invest in businesses that we control, usually buying 100% of each. Berkshire directs capital allocation at these subsidiaries and selects the CEOs who make day-by-day operating decisions. When large enterprises are being managed, both trust and rules are essential. Berkshire emphasizes the former to an unusual, some would say extreme, degree. Disappointments are inevitable. We are understanding about business mistakes. Our tolerance for personal misconduct is zero. In our second category of ownership, we buy publicly traded stocks through which we passively own pieces of businesses. Holding these investments, we have no say in management. Our goal in both forms of ownership is to make meaningful investments in businesses with both long-lasting favorable economic characteristics and trustworthy managers. Please note particularly that we own publicly traded stocks based on our expectations about their long-term business performance, not because we view them as vehicles for adroit purchases and sales. That point is crucial. Charlie and I are not stock pickers, we are business pickers. Over the years, I have made many mistakes. Consequently, our extensive collection of businesses currently consists of a few enterprises that have truly extraordinary economics, many that enjoy very good economic characteristics, and a large group that are marginal. Along the way, other businesses in which I have invested have died, their products unwanted by the public. Capitalism has two sides. The system creates an ever-growing pile of losers while concurrent delivering a gusher of improved goods and services. Schumpeter called this phenomenon creative destruction. One advantage of our publicly traded segment is that, episodically, it becomes easy to buy pieces of wonderful businesses at wonderful prices. It's crucial to understand that stocks often trade at truly foolish prices, both high and low. Efficient markets exist only in textbooks. In truth, marketable stocks and bonds are baffling, their behavior usually understandable only in retrospect. Controlled businesses are a different breed. They sometimes command ridiculously higher prices than justified, but are almost never available at bargain valuations. Unless under duress, the owner of a controlled business gives no thought to selling at a panic-type valuation. At this point, a report card from me is appropriate. In 58 years of Berkshire management, most of my capital allocation decisions have been no better than so-so. In some cases also, bad moves by me have been rescued by very large doses of luck. Remember our escapes from near disasters at US Air and Salomon? I certainly do. Our satisfactory results have been the product of about a dozen truly good decisions. That would be about one every 5 years, and a sometimes forgotten advantage that favors long-term investors such as Berkshire. Let's take a peek behind the curtain. The secret sauce. In August 1994, yes, 1994, Berkshire completed its 7-year purchase of the 400 million shares of Coca-Cola we now own. The total cost was $1.3 billion, then a very meaningful sum at Berkshire. The cash dividend we received from Coke in 1994 was $75 million. By 2022, the dividend had increased to $704 million. Growth occurred every year, just as certain as birthdays. All Charlie and I were required to do was cash Coke's quarterly dividend checks. We expect that those checks are highly likely to grow. American Express is much the same story. Berkshire's purchases of Amex were essentially completed in 1995, and, coincidentally, also cost $1.3 billion. Annual dividends received from this investment have grown from $41 million to $302 million. Those checks, too, seem highly likely to increase. These dividend gains, though pleasing, are far from spectacular, but they bring with them important gains in stock prices. At year-end, Our Coke investment was valued at $25 billion, while Amex was recorded at $22 billion. Each holding now accounts for roughly 5% of Berkshire's net worth, akin to its weighting long ago. Assume, for a moment, I had made a similarly sized investment mistake in the 1,990 seconds, one that flatlined and simply retained its $1.3 billion value in 2022. An example would be a high-grade 30-year bond. That disappointing investment would now represent an insignificant 0.3% of Berkshire's net worth, and would be delivering to us an unchanged $80 million or so of annual income. The lesson for investors: the weeds wither away in significance as the flowers bloom. Over time, it takes just a few winners to work wonders. And, yes, it helps to start early and live into your 90 seconds as well. The past year in brief. Berkshire had a good year in 2022. The company's operating earnings, our term for income calculated using generally accepted accounting principles (GAAP), exclusive of capital gains or losses from equity holdings, set a record at $30.8 billion. Charlie and I focus on this operational figure, and urge you to do so as well. The GAAP figure, absent our adjustment, fluctuates wildly and capriciously at every reporting date. Note its acrobatic behavior in 2022, which is in no way unusual. The GAAP earnings are 100% misleading when viewed quarterly or even annually. Capital gains, to be sure, have been hugely important to Berkshire over past decades, and we expect them to be meaningfully positive in future decades. But their quarter-by-quarter gyrations, regularly and mindlessly headlined by media, totally misinform investors. A second positive development for Berkshire last year was our purchase of Allegheny Corporation, a property casualty insurer captained by Joe Brandon. I've worked with Joe in the past, and he understands both Berkshire and insurance. Allegheny delivers special value to us because Berkshire's unmatched financial strength allows its insurance subsidiaries to follow valuable and enduring investment strategies unavailable to virtually all competitors. Aided by Allegheny, our insurance float increased during 2022 from $147 billion to $164 billion. With disciplined underwriting, these funds have a decent chance of being cost-free over time. Since purchasing our first property casualty insurer in 1967, Berkshire's float has increased 8,000-fold through acquisitions, operations, and innovations. Though not recognized in our financial statements, this float has been an extraordinary asset for Berkshire. New shareholders can get an understanding of its value by reading our annually updated explanation of float on page A2. A very minor gain in per-share intrinsic value took place in 2022 through Berkshire share purchases, as well as similar moves at Apple and American Express, both significant investees of ours. At Berkshire, we directly increased your interest in our unique collection of businesses by purchasing 1.2% of the company's outstanding shares. At Apple and Amex, repurchases increased Berkshire's ownership a bit without any cost to us. The math isn't complicated. When the share count goes down, your interest in our many businesses goes up. Every small bit helps if repurchases are made at value-accretive prices. Just as surely, when a company overpays for repurchases, the continuing shareholders lose. At such times, gains flow only to the selling shareholders and to the friendly, but expensive, investment banker who recommended the foolish purchases. Gains from value-accretive repurchases, it should be emphasized, benefit all owners, in every respect. Imagine, if you will, 3 fully informed shareholders of a local auto dealership, one of whom manages the business. Imagine, further, that one of the passive owners wishes to sell his interest back to the company at a price attractive to the 2 continuing shareholders. When completed, has this transaction harmed anyone? Is the manager somehow favored over the continuing passive owners? Has the public been hurt? When you are told that all repurchases are harmful to shareholders, or to the country, or particularly beneficial to CEOs, you are listening to either an economic illiterate or a silver-tongued demagogue. Characters that are not mutually exclusive. Leo. Almost endless details of Berkshire's 2022 operations are laid out on pages K33, K66. Charlie and I, along with many Berkshire shareholders, enjoy poring over the many facts and figures laid out in that section. These pages are not, however, required reading. There are many Berkshire centimillionaires, and yes, billionaires who have never studied our financial figures. They simply know that Charlie and I, along with our families and close friends, continue to have very significant investments in Berkshire, and they trust us to treat their money as we do our own. And that is a promise we can make. Finally, an important warning. Even the operating earnings figure that we favor can easily be manipulated by managers who wish to do so. Such tampering is often thought of as sophisticated by CEOs, directors, and their advisors. Reporters and analysts embrace its existence as well. Beating expectations is heralded as a managerial triumph. That activity is disgusting. It requires no talent to manipulate numbers. Only a deep desire to deceive is required. Bold imaginative accounting, as a CEO once described his deception tome, has become one of the shames of capitalism. 58 years. And a few figures. In 1965, Berkshire was a one-trick pony, the owner of a venerable, but doomed, New England textile operation. With that business on a death march, Berkshire needed an immediate fresh start. Looking back, I was slow to recognize the severity of its problems. And then came a stroke of good luck. National indemnity became available in 1967, and we shifted our resources toward insurance and other non-textile operations. Thus began our journey to 2023, a bumpy road involving a combination of continuous savings by our owners, that is, by their retaining earnings, the power of compounding, our avoidance of major mistakes, and, most important of all, the American tailwind. America would have done fine without Berkshire. The reverse is not true. Berkshire now enjoys major ownership in an unmatched collection of huge and diversified businesses. Let's first look at the 5,000 or so publicly held companies that trade daily on NASDAQ, the NYSE and related venues. Within this group is housed the members of the S&P 500 Index, an elite collection of large and well-known American companies. In aggregate, the 500 earned $1.8 trillion in 2021. I don't yet have the final results for 2022. Using, therefore, the 2021 figures, only 128 of the 500, including Berkshire itself, earned $3 billion or more. Indeed, 23 lost money. At year-end 2022, Berkshire was the largest owner of 8 of these giants: American Express, Bank of America, Chevron, Coca-Cola, HP Incorporated, Moody's, Occidental Petroleum, and Paramount Global. In addition to those 8 investees, Berkshire owns 100% of BNSF and 92% of BH Energy, each with earnings that exceed the $3 billion mark noted above. $5.9 billion at BNSF and $4.3 billion at BHE. Were these companies publicly owned? They would replace 2 present members of the 500. All told, our 10 controlled and non-controlled behemoths leave Berkshire more broadly aligned with the country's economic future than is the case at any other U.S. company. This calculation leaves aside fiduciary operations, such as pension funds and investment companies. In addition, Berkshire's insurance operation, though conducted through many individually managed subsidiaries, has a value comparable to BNSF or BHE. As for the future, Berkshire will always hold a boatload of cash and U.S. Treasury bills, along with a wide array of businesses. We will also avoid behavior that could result in any uncomfortable cash needs at inconvenient times, including financial panics and unprecedented insurance losses. Our CEO will always be the Chief Risk Officer, a task it is irresponsible to delegate. Additionally, our future CEOs will have a significant part of their net worth in Berkshire shares, bought with their own money. And yes, our shareholders will continue to save and prosper by retaining earnings. At Berkshire, there will be no finish line. Some surprising facts about federal taxes. During the decade ending in 2021, the United States Treasury received about $32.3 trillion in taxes, while it spent $43.9 trillion. Though economists, politicians, and many of the public have opinions about the consequences of that huge imbalance, Charlie and I plead ignorance and firmly believe that near-term economic and market forecasts are worse than useless. Our job is to manage Berkshire's operations and finances in a manner that will achieve an acceptable result over time, and that will preserve the company's unmatched staying power when financial panics or severe worldwide recessions occur. Berkshire also offers some modest protection from runaway inflation, but this attribute is far from perfect. Huge and entrenched fiscal deficits have consequences. The $32 trillion of revenue was garnered by the Treasury through individual income taxes, 48%, Social Security and related receipts, 3412%, corporate income tax payments, 812%, and a wide variety of lesser levies. Berkshire's contribution via the corporate income tax was $32 billion during the decade, almost exactly 0.1% of all money that the Treasury collected. Bah! And that means, brace yourself, had there been roughly 1,000 taxpayers in the U.S., matching Berkshire's payments, no other businesses nor any of the country's 131 million households would have needed to pay any taxes to the federal government. Not a dime. Millions, billions, trillions. We all know the words, but the sums involved are almost impossible to comprehend. Let's put physical dimensions to the numbers. If you convert $1 million into newly printed $100 bills, you will have a stack that reaches your chest. Perform the same exercise with $1 billion. This is getting exciting. And the stack reaches about 3/4 of a mile into the sky. Finally, imagine piling up $32 billion, the total of Berkshire's 2012 to 21 federal income tax payments. Now the stack grows to more than 21 miles in height, about 3 times the level at which commercial airplanes usually cruise. When it comes to federal taxes, individuals who own Berkshire can unequivocally state, "I gave it the office." At Berkshire, we hope and expect to pay much more in taxes during the next decade. Wayo the country no less. America's dynamism has made a huge contribution to whatever success Berkshire has achieved, a contribution Berkshire will always need. We count on the American tailwind and, though it has been becalmed from time to time, its propelling force has always turned. I have been investing for 80 years, more than 1/3 of our country's lifetime. Despite our citizens' penchant, almost enthusiasm, for self-criticism and self-doubt, I have yet to see Adam May when it made sense to make a long-term bet against America. And I doubt very much that any reader of this letter will have a different experience in the future. Nothing beats having a great partner. Charlie and I think pretty much alike. But what it takes me a page to explain, he sums up in a sentence. His version, moreover, is always more clearly reasoned and also more artfully, some might add bluntly, stated. Here are a few of his thoughts. Many lifted from a very recent podcast. The world is full of foolish gamblers, and they will not do as well as the patient investor. If you don't see the world the way it is, it's like judging something through a distorted lens. All I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there. And a related thought, early on, write your desired obituary, and then behave accordingly. If you don't care whether you are rational or not, you won't work on it. Then you will stay irrational and get lousy results. 9. Patience can be learned. Having a long attention span and the ability to concentrate on one thing for a long time is a huge advantage. You can learn a lot from dead people. Read of the deceased you admire and detest. Don't bail away in a sinking boat if you can swim to one that is seaworthy. A great company keeps working after you are not. A mediocre company won't do that. Warren and I don't focus on the froth of the market. We seek out good long-term investments and stubbornly hold them for a long time. Ben Graham said, "Day to day, the stock market is a voting machine. In the long term, it's a weighing machine. If you keep making something more valuable, then some wise person is going to notice it and start buying. There is no such thing as a 100% sure thing when investing. Thus, the use of leverage is dangerous. A string of wonderful numbers times 0 will always equal 0. Don't count on getting rich twice. You don't, however, need to own a lot of things in order to get rich. You have to keep learning if you want to become a great investor. When the world changes, you must change." Warren and I hated railroad stocks for decades. But the world changed and finally the country had 4 huge railroads of vital importance to the American economy. We were slow to recognize the change, but better late than never. Finally, I will add 2 short sentences by Charlie that have been his decision clinchers for decades. Warren, think more about it. You're smart, and I'm right. And so it goes. I never have a phone call with Charlie without learning something. And, while he makes me think, he also makes me laugh. I will add to Charlie's list a rule of my own. Find a very smart high-grade partner, preferably slightly older than you, and then listen very carefully to what he says. A family gathering in Omaha. Charlie and I are shameless. Last year, at our first shareholder get-together in 3 years, we greeted you with our usual commercial hustle. From the opening bell, we went straight for your wallet. In short order, our C's Kia sold you 11 tons of nourishing peanut brittle and chocolates. In our PT, Barnum pitch, what promised you longevity. After all, what else but candy from C's could account for Charlie and me making it to 99 and 92? I know you can't wait to hear the specifics of last year's hustle. On Friday, the doors were open from noon until 5 p.m., and our candy counters rang up 2,690 individual sales. On Saturday, See's registered an additional 3,931 transactions between 7 a.m. and 4:30 p.m., despite the fact that 612 of the 912 operating hours occurred, while our movie and the question and answer session were limiting commercial traffic. Do the math. See's rang up about 10 sales per minute during its prime operating time, racking up $400,309 of volume during the 2 days, with all the goods purchased at a single location selling products that haven't been materially altered in 101 years. What worked for See's in the days of Henry Ford's Model T works now. Charlie, I, and the entire Berkshire bunch look forward to seeing you in Omaha on May 5 to 6. We will have a good time, and so will you. Warren E. Buffett, Chairman of the Board.